I'm Dr. Sabine Hazan. I'm a gastroenterologist by trade. Have been doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies for almost 3 decades. I'm not here to shake the beehive of the FDA. I'm here to make sure that the FDA is doing what it's supposed to do, which is assuring my safety and the safety of millions of Americans that are paying taxes.
Right.
Because I spearhead the microbiome research, I started paying attention because of the genetic sequence of the virus. And we kind of joined forces with a lot of doctors in America. And when we collected stool samples, we noticed the whole sequence of COVID in the stools. We basically started analyzing what is the best combination therapy to put out. Some of the doctors were saying, vitamin C seems to be working in Italy. Then the protocol of Didier Raoult came out. Hydroxychloroquine was interesting because millions of prescriptions. We've never had any problems. Azithromycin was another good solution, and zinc certainly seemed plausible. I said, I bet you hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin kill the virus, and then vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc increase the microbiome, right? When we found the whole genome of COVID in the stools, we discovered that 2 people that were on hydroxychloroquine and Z-Pak didn't have the virus anymore. So I started writing the protocol sometime in March, and the FDA says, you don't need to do a clinical trial, proceed. And that was like April 3rd. A couple days later, they said, I'm sorry, Dr. Hazan, you have to do a full-on clinical trial. My protocol was seen by a lot of doctors on clinicaltrials.gov. April 13th, I get a letter from the Gates Foundation.
Here's the quote. We are helping WHO, the World Health Organization, to track and monitor clinical trials evaluating pre-exposure prophylaxis of healthcare workers. We are especially interested in those studies using either chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine.
Right, wasn't that interesting?
The World Health Organization
Yes.
was being coordinated with a private institution in the United States, and not just your clinical trial, but all of them.
Right. So I'm thinking, Mr. Gates wants to invest in my clinical trials, right? So I wrote a long letter saying, my family has been in the clinical trial business for years, and then I didn't hear back. April 19th, 2020. There was a tweet that went on Twitter. Nick DeVito, 5 therapies at once on 600 patients in a single arm trial. What are we even doing? How does this get approved? And who is he? Clinical Research Integrity, University of Oxford. University of Oxford that started the clinical trial that Monday. At the same time, a retweet by Vinay Prasad, uncontrolled study of 5 drugs all at once for COVID, scientifically bankrupt, ethically bankrupt. COVID is pushing us to a new research lows. First of all, it's not 5 therapies. It's zinc, vitamin C, and vitamin D, and there's only 2 medications. So I'm seeing this and I'm like, you actually are thinking of doing a placebo-controlled trial in a pandemic where people are dying.
The Gates Foundation has given over $329 million to Nick DeVito's employer, the University of Oxford, and over $301 million to Vinay Prasad's employer, the University of California, San Francisco.
On Monday, there's a letter that went out from Stat News to all the regulatory agencies, including the FDA, that said, your thoughts on placebo in a pandemic. A new COVID-19 clinical trial is drawing up some attention on bio-Twitter. Aside from the controversy surrounding hydroxychloroquine and the gut-demolishing potential of a 24-week of an antibiotic, we did have a question for you. Do placebo arms even have a place in a fast-moving pandemic? So this was sent. That day, my protocol was put on hold. So they said, sorry, Dr. Hazan, you need to do a placebo-controlled trial.
Reports indicate this Stat News email was sent to the FDA and other regulatory officials, a select audience that would have the power to kill or delay Dr. Hazan's study.
I called the FDA and I said, okay, the placebo is going to be vitamins. New England IRB waits 2 weeks and says, I'm sorry, Dr. Hazan, we cannot take your protocol. Bottom line is I switched to IRBs. It took us another month to get started. And if you'll recall, there was a lot of talking about hydroxychloroquine in the media. By the time we were ready to recruit, it was too late. The media had destroyed hydroxychloroquine. People that were dying were afraid to take it because they were afraid of a heart attack. And essentially, here I am with a protocol. It was very difficult to enroll. Doing clinical trial was never about the money for me. And it was more important for me to see the data first because I wanted to make sure, like, what is going on right now, right? Is this about money? Because if it's about money, then it's disgusting that we killed a person for the price of a stock. Interference in research happened.
The Gates Foundation allegedly invested $100 million in COVID therapeutics, but the organization has devoted far more to vaccine research, with over $6 billion going just to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. Due to the legal requirements for emergency use authorizations, Gates' investments in vaccines would have been threatened by any drug proven to work against COVID. Luckily for the foundation, Dr. Hazan's trial was delayed until after the fraudulent Surgisphere study destroyed public confidence in hydroxychloroquine. We have begun submitting Freedom of Information Act requests to find out what involvement Gates Foundation had with all of the other hydroxychloroquine trial researchers.
Bill Gates said, vaccine is the best investment I've ever made. I think we need to put the blame on whoever is controlling the FDA.
How has the last 4 years affected your perception of medicine?
It's really opened my eyes to the point that I say to myself, have I wasted 30 years of my life doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies?